All right, we're in the fifth video series about permission sets and becoming a permission set based admin. Hopefully, you're now familiar, have turned on permission sets in your org, have built a scaffolding that's shown in video 3, and have begun some day to day tasks. Now, you might have run into some objection from your bosses or your governance committee, and so I want to motivate a little bit why it's so important to make the transition to permission set based administration now. It's important for you because you'll be building career value. In 2026, we're expecting Salesforce to enforce a transition that permissions move from the profile to the permission set. We don't know what that's going to look like, but we can imagine it's going to cause extra work, extra headache, some confusion potentially. And by developing the muscles starting now, it's only 2 years from now, you will be well positioned to have high career value when the change comes. Second, you can deliver things faster, so you're able to do more administration work now. And we've talked about some examples of that during the video, but I thought I might get a specific example here. If you need to deploy 3 new objects to 5 profiles, just assume they all need every field. There's no nuances there, but every object needs to be given to 5 different profiles. That's visiting 25 page visits through the user interface. That's a lot of tediousness. The same deployment using permission sets would be 12 page visits. That's half. And on top of that, you've only put in the detailed provisioning once, and you're just assigning into the permission sets with about half of those page visits. So there's no further chance of error, which is really important. Similarly, let's assume that you make a mistake in the deployment and you've either left out a field or left out an object, or I don't know, you've given the wrong access. When you do it with 5 profiles, you have to go make the change, fix 5 times. And the world is full of error, of stories where this is a hot fix, it's done late at night, you fix 4 out of 5, but I forgot to save or I forgot to make the change for the whoever. And so that's a very common error, and it just creates more ripple effect down the line and takes more of your time. And so you end up getting a lot less done this way. With permission sets, you fix it once, it propagates to everyone, and it's over. So those are 2 really good reasons why you should be doing it. Let's talk about your organization. A lot of times, governance committees will have been burned in the past and don't want to adopt something new, like permission sets. We've been doing profiles for a long time. We don't want to change. Not yet. So one of the best reasons they should change now is they need to think about over-provisioning and what it costs them. Now, let's define something. Over-provisioning is when you have provisioned a user with too much visibility, too much capability, too much access. It can be access to apps or objects or fields, but they see too much. Now, this is extremely common. In the worst case scenario, I've seen many in our organization, a nonprofit organization, considered doing it when I was a complete newbie as well, where everyone is an admin. Because the first user was an admin, they got it working. It doesn't work for the second user because they're not an admin. And so you just make them an admin too. And pretty soon that's your habit. And unless everyone is on the governance committee and everyone has admin skills and everyone needs to have the same access, it's just really a bad idea. But it's very common. And the same thing happens in departments. You have a finance department and then you have a second finance person, and they don't need the same access, but rather than create a whole new profile and figure everything out, you just make them the same profile. And it's so common to do that. But one of them has too much permission. Perhaps one of them is a junior assistant and shouldn't be able to delete anything, but they can. So those are a couple examples of how we might over provision, but it gets worse. The cost of over provisioning is many headed. Too many objects cause confusion. So you spend a lot of time getting your user on board and they know exactly where to go. You show them how at their desk while you're there several times. You go away. They want to recreate that, but they get lost somehow. And so they start searching for event management and they see one that looks right and they click on it, but it doesn't quite look like what it did before, but it's close. So they do the work, but it's the wrong app or the wrong object. They should have never seen it, but they did. And so now you have to go back and retrain them. And they're frustrated and confused, and it takes longer for them to become competent and proficient, and it takes more of your time to train them, and it's just expensive, and it's because of over provisioning. When there are more than one place to put a piece of data or it looks kind of the same, people put it sometimes here, sometimes there, and you end up with dirty data or duplicate data, and that costs money. When people are able to delete data that they shouldn't, they may. When people see information that they shouldn't, maybe they're intrigued and like what they see, but it raises in the back of their head the overall question of, is this system trustworthy? Should I put my customer sensitive data there since I saw my coworkers' customer sensitive data? Maybe I won't put my sensitive data in there about my customer, and because I don't trust the system. And so when people see things that they shouldn't, it reduces trust, causes the organization to not be able to operate as you have intended it, as the bosses have intended it. And all of the above talks about good intentioned people. You also could have bad actors. If you could have an employee who's leaving or a new employee who comes in who does not have good intentions. And if they have been over provisioned, you could end up on the news, or you could end up with a data breach and having to send thousands of letters to people apologizing and explaining what their rights are and what they need to do next. And you don't want any of that. So profiles properly done don't have to have any over provisioning. But the fact is, we've been over provisioning for years in Salesforce, and permission sets and permission set groups contain some additional tools, in particular, the reusability of a permission set, in particular, muting of permissions within a permission set group, particular, reuse of permission set groups among more than one user. So as a user, I don't have to have just one permission set group. I can have multiple. And these are tools that never existed within profiles that can help us avoid over provisioning. We must not be lazy. I assume admins were really never lazy, but we must not allow ourselves to continue to feel overburdened so that we accept over provisioning. It is really expensive, and it needs to be a practice that permission set based admins lead the charge on to stop. I wanted to show you an example. I mean, here's a very nice example. I train our team to use our SIM event management app. That's a mouthful, and it comes up by default. But if they happen to go somewhere else with the app picker, they've got to come back to this. And this app is reasonably well provisioned. Each tab that you can see in the app has a useful function and so on. But if you get away from the app, many of my employees do that so infrequently that they can't find their way back. And if you type event management or event in the search bar, you'll find at least 3 apps that contain the word event. Only one, and one of them's old and not useful, and one of them's something else altogether that they probably shouldn't be seeing. We are over provisioned, and it causes a great deal of confusion to users who need to do something infrequently, such as navigate back to this app that they use all the time. And hopefully we can do better. An example of a better provisioned app, we have an intern user, and we have used permission sets rather than the same base profile for that. And so they see far less as an intern, and they only see inventory and event management. It's the only two things that they see as apps. And they only see the objects that are related to those. And so they cannot get lost as easily. So they remain focused, confident, become proficient, and are able to do the job much faster. Another example of something we did with permission sets that I don't know that we would have done with profiles. We have a volunteer who helps us out with a lot of publicity. They do a lot of proofreading for us. And it turns out we have a lot of things that need proofreading, and therefore they need a lot of different apps, but they don't need all the objects in it. And so we have created a permission set group for that volunteer and added in the permission sets and muted out all the things that they do not need to proofread and that are unrelated to the object. And so they have a lot of focus and can navigate among several apps proficiently with minimal training, and have come on board really nicely and much faster than a full staff member comes on board. So those are some examples. Last reason you should be doing it now. You are not an early adopter, and you need to tell your organization they are not an early adopter of permission set groups. They are a fast follower at this point. And if they wait 2 years, they'll be a slow adopter. And so if you were an early adopter, you were using permission sets back in 2019, and that was a little painful. I've been doing so since then, and so I have a lot of practiced muscle using permission sets and permission set groups, and there's a lot better features that have come along in the years that would have made it easier. But early was back in 2019. It is no longer early. And if you wait until 2026, it's going to be costly. And so it is the right time to become a permission set based admin and a permission set based organization. So I'm going to stop there. And our last video is going to be about bigger jobs to be done. I'm going to say a little bit more about some of those examples of avoiding over provisioning. All right. Thanks much. Bye.